Dome Runners TV, your guide to the Underhive and beyond.
Hey there, scabby scummers and gangers. Crimson Oracle here with another episode of Dome Runners TV. And today we are going to be changing the script up a little bit. We're not going to be talking about Necromunda. We're not going to be talking about Warhammer. We're not going to be talking about science fiction or gaming or anything like that. Instead, I'm going to talk a little bit about pride, about trans issues, and about why the trans people you know, if you live in the US, are probably terrified right now, and why you should care. This is an uncomfortable topic for me to get into because I prefer to keep this show, directly on topic with the stuff that interests me. And I don't want to kind of go so far out of pocket as to do a video that's unlike anything else on the channel. But it's scary to be trans in the United States right now. And I don't know when or if that's going to end before something horrible happens. And I hate to be so melodramatic about it, but I'm not being melodramatic. That's the actual truth of it. We are in a very precarious, dangerous situation, and I don't think many people are fully aware of just how scary it is. They see people on Twitter or potentially on YouTube or the news talking about trans genocide, and they think it's a buzzword, that we're being hyperbolic. And that's not what's going on. And I know that it's hard to understand that necessarily because it doesn't seem like genocide is a realistic threat right now. But the thing is that genocides don't start with extermination. It doesn't begin at rounding up masses of people and murdering them. We are in a situation that is incredibly dangerous, and I kind of want to get into why. There's a common impression, and this is definitely reinforced by our education system, that history moves towards progress, right? The quote, the arc of the history is long, but it bends towards justice. That phrase is taught, but its real meaning is not conveyed very well, which is that the arc is long, which is to say that we have a very long journey and it bends towards justice, which means that gradually, in fits and starts, things move in the right direction. But the idea of an arc, though, is a line. But in truth, it's not really a line. You see, progress is a push. And there's always someone pulling on the other side. And we forget about that when we talk about the progress of rights. But the truth is that every time you see progress, there's pullback. You can look at the end and abolition of slavery in the United States. The pullback was almost immediate. There was a push to end Reconstruction and reinstitute the exact same kind of oppressive system that existed before. It was not complete. It didn't reinstitute slavery entirely. You can actually watch a really good video about slavery after the era of slavery from Knowing Better, which I will link right here. But the truth is that this is common, and it happens everywhere. Whenever you have a push to make things more inclusive, to extend more rights to people, to bring people into the fold of society, however you want to put it, there is a concerted effort to undo those changes because there is always a contingent of people who firmly believe in those things which we are trying to overturn. You can see this very easily in a little country known as Germany. In the 1920s and 30s, there was a massive expansion of creativity, of freedom. And in that environment, there was a sexual liberation going on. Things like homosexuality, cross-dressing, drag, even trans-affirming surgeries were being pioneered. But these kinds of things, these progress, this push for more acceptance is always met with a pull from the forces of reaction. And in Germany, as I'm sure everyone knows, these reactionary forces were known as the Nazi Party. And when they came to power in Germany, they immediately began to crack down on those personal freedoms that people had come to embrace. And suddenly, people who were comfortable and safe living their lives as the people that they were persecuted, were attacked. All the research that had been done on trans surgery, on trans experience, on trans treatment was burned publicly. In fact, you've seen the picture, but you probably didn't know at the time that many of those books that you were looking at were originals with no copies that existed, being burned, erasing part of trans and queer history. And this again was a country who was on the forefront of trans rights just a few months earlier. Things can change like that. It's scary because we don't know for sure that things will always be safe when we make the decision to come out and be public about who we are. I'm a trans woman, and I came out specifically because I believe that it's important for us to be public about who we are in order to change people's minds, in order to show people that we are among you, and we might be someone that you know or that you care for, and that, God damn it, we deserve to be treated like human beings. But the pull is always on the horizon, and we have to deal and contend now with circumstances that I find to be quite concerning, at times terrifying, because it didn't take much for a minority to seize power in Germany and become tyrannical. And they start with the minorities. They always start with the minorities. They can't help but do it because the ideology of fascism is about control. And you can't just immediately institute a police state. People will resist. You have to do it by pieces. And if you start with people who are less likely to be able to resist, it's easier. And people become used to it. In Germany, they didn't start by arresting people for being gay or being Jewish. They arrested them for anti-German behavior or for race mixing or various other things that were considered to be crimes against the people, the Volk. And they always, always, always painted the people that they were going after as a threat. Guess what? It's still the playbook. "5 years ago, I'd never heard the term groomer before. It's now common parlance. And I gotta say, I think that the main reason for that is it was a new way to rebrand something that's been going on for a long time. For as long as I can remember, homosexuality, queerness in general, has been conflated with predation on children by reactionary elements in the media. This is not even sort of a new thing. It's exactly what they were saying on evangelical radio stations in the 1990s. It's exactly what they were saying on Fox News in the 2000s. They conflated the legalization of gay marriage with pedophilia, with bestiality. This approach was losing its effectiveness, especially as visibility of gay people became commonplace. And suddenly everyone got to see these supposedly dangerous people, and it turned out that they really didn't seem very dangerous at all. And there was this massive expansion of acceptance and understanding and, behavior that people got away with in the 90s when I was in school, being bullied for not fitting my gender properly. Nowadays, that kind of behavior would be treated very seriously. Nobody cared back then. And it's funny because it's not actually working on most people. Acceptance is still going up. Acceptance is still marching forward. But the minority want to paint us as a serious threat. And this is being engaged in by a number of public figures who I will not mention here, because I think that a lot of them are doing it to gain a profile, to gain attention. They think if you can say the most shocking and the most vile things that you can think of about trans people, that it will get you attention. And they're not wrong. And I don't think it's wrong for people in our community to address these individuals and their claims, because, of course, some people will be taken in by them. But personally, I think that they're a bunch of cowards who are only doing this because they are behind a camera, and that any one of them would be completely unwilling to walk into a situation like Pride, where they might actually have to face consequences for the calls to violent state oppression that they are engaged in. And it may come time that we have to address them by name, that we have to go after them in various ways to discredit them, and that's fair. But personally, I'm just going to call them them. These people, they want to conflate transness with violence. They want to make us seem to be predators. They want us to be grooming children. But what they mean by that is actually listening to children and getting them the health care that they need if they happen to be experiencing gender dysphoria. And it's infuriating because there are plenty of equivalent decisions that have to be made medically for children that no one blinks an eye at. In fact, many of the bills right now that are banning trans surgeries for children, which generally speaking are not performed, are actually written with an exception allowing doctors to non-consensually perform surgery on infants to correct intersex conditions. There are so many things that our society does that are not protecting children. Don't even get me started on the fact that Congress refused to renew the expanded child tax credit, which was giving checks to families every month and reducing child poverty, or the lack of investment in education, or any of the countless things that our society does to harm children. Instead, it's much flashier to have this media story about, this minority and to make them the boogeyman. And that's how it starts. See, at the same time that the groomer concept popped up, there's also a growing vigilante movement targeting people that they see as child sexual predators. You see things like kill your local pedophile, things like that, calling for extrajudicial action. And they say it's because the cops won't do anything. And, don't get me wrong, there are many things that cops are bad at. And I don't think that it's wrong to criticize them. But that does not mean violently, without any right or trial or due process, killing people. But that's what they want. You see, they want to, on the one hand, make us all out to be a threat to children. And on the other hand, incite violence. Stochastic terrorism is the common term that you'll see people use. These two things together create an environment where it's dangerous to be visibly trans in public, even in places where it should be safe. States are engaged in a most vile and violent form of state oppression. Texas wants to separate trans children from their parents and force them to detransition. This is child abuse on an institutional scale. And they view it as them protecting kids. It's always insidious how these persecutions sneak into law. It's not even law in Texas. It's just the Attorney General trying to gin up resistance. But as scary as all of that is, and it's terrifying, sometimes you're out in public and you catch a look from someone and you have to wonder, are they armed? Is this person a threat to my life? And there's nothing you can do to protect yourself from that kind of random, unexpected violence. It's an insidious fear that just creeps into your soul until you start to change your behavior. And they say that trans women don't understand women's experience of fearing violence, but we do experience it. And I don't want to make it seem like my experience is the worst of the worst, because the truth is that the vast majority of violent crime against trans women is committed against trans women of color. And I'm a white woman, but I still feel the fear, and I still catch those glares. But it gets worse. Stochastic terrorism, anti-trans laws across the country. This is not the thing that scares me at my core. The thing that terrifies me is the fact that it is Republican doctrine at this point to oppose transgender people's existence. And the United States has a manifestly unfair system of government. If you look at the way power is distributed in this country, it is incredibly easy for a minority, a shrinking minority, to seize all three branches of government. They already control the judiciary. They want the legislature. They control half of it already, and the Senate is almost a rigged game at this point. The truth is that it's not so difficult to see next year Republicans in the presidency, Senate, the House, and with already control over the judiciary. And controlling those branches of government, unlike the Democrats, who are so wedded to the idea of fairness and bipartisanship that they'll never go so far as to actually do something to advantage themselves. No, Republicans will have the power to ensure that they are the government for the foreseeable future. You see, it doesn't take much to nudge that scale. There's a risk that if the Senate is lost by the Democrats, that Republicans will control it for the next decade, maybe more. Each year, it's a challenge just to get to 50-50. And Democrats will never repeal the filibuster. But Republicans have already gone far out of their way to dismantle it. And when they have the opportunity, I cannot imagine them keeping it long term. The truth is that we are in a precarious situation. We sit on the edge of a knife. Our system of government is not fair, it's not democratic, and it's not designed to protect people like me. It was never intended to. The founding fathers were just as bigoted as everyone else of their time. Conservatives will tell you that the founding fathers were geniuses because they designed a system that enabled them to eliminate slavery down the road. The truth is that the amendment process was designed to be so difficult as to be impossible to enforce the will of the majority on the rest of the states. And so we find ourselves in this situation where if Democrats win, we see Republicans become more insane, more conspiratorial, more violent. But when Democrats lose, Republicans will do everything they accuse their opponents of doing. This is not a defense of the Democratic Party. I don't think the Democratic Party needs defending. But we have enemies. These people want to kill us. They want to force us off of our hormones, to deny our medical treatments. They want to force us to wear men's clothing, or they will arrest us on the street. That's what the law was for much of the 20th century. The masquerade law in New York City was still on the books in 2010. And that law was written almost primarily to police cross-dressing. And so we find ourselves in this situation where at a mere turn of an election, the entire situation could change. What about federalism, you might say? Isn't the whole point of our government that states have the right to determine how they govern, and the federal government doesn't get involved in this kind of stuff? It just deals with issues between the states and of borders and national security, diplomacy, etc. Oh, my dear sweet summer child. Federalism is only important when they are losing. They only want states' rights when they are the ones who are on defense. When they're on the attack, they don't give a flying fuck about states' rights, principles, strict constructionism, literalism. No. These are reactionaries. They will use whatever means and tools at their disposal to achieve what they want, which is to drag society back to their view. That's what they mean when they say they want to eliminate transgenderism, or however you want to characterize it. It's not possible to eliminate trans people who've been born into every generation of every human civilization for all of human history. We are inevitable. Instead, what they want to do is ban and regulate our personal expression, regulate our behavior. They want to use the state and state violence to stop us from being ourselves. And that is genocide. It will lead to suicide. It will lead to imprisonment. It will lead to horrifying things. And I'm not so sure that we can stop it through normal means. I don't know for sure that voting is going to do this. I'm not saying don't vote, because Jesus Christ, I don't want to have to fight in the streets with these people. But what I am saying is that if the state comes for us, we must be prepared to resist. And I don't presume to tell you what your personal form of resistance looks like. But if it's just trans people defending themselves, I'm not sure that we can win. We need allies. We need allies who are willing to put their bodies on the line, because they know they won't stop with us. They're not going to stop with other minorities. They will come for each and every one of your freedoms, because their ideology is an ideology of perfectionism, of purity, and there is no such thing as a pure and perfect person. It is a death cult. They eat their own. When they've run out of minorities to persecute, they will persecute you. And when they've run out of you, they will turn on each other. This is not some debate that we are engaged in. Sadly, what we are doing is fighting a cancer, and it will kill us, all of us, if we do not resist. I don't want to talk about violence on this channel. I don't want to talk about the things that you have to do to protect yourself. We have to be frank about the circumstances that we're in. It's life and death. And maybe, just maybe, they will keep losing. Their movement will become increasingly obscure. And they'll probably become more violent in the process, because that's one of the side effects of these movements not getting what they want, is they start to lash out more and more and more. But if you give in, if you think, okay, now that they are in power, they will moderate. They were just using this to get the reins of power. They'll actually chill out. They weren't serious. My friend, I have to tell you that you are deeply, deeply naive. They will come for us. They will come for you. They do not care. And you can see it in their rhetoric. They don't even think that we're Americans. They refer to themselves as real Americans. The rest of us, the people that they view as undesirable, huge swaths of the country, a majority of the country, in fact, we're un-American. We don't deserve the rights that we have. We don't deserve the possessions that we own. They want to prime their audience to be ready to accept our extermination where possible. So how the hell do I end a video like this? Because I don't have a happy-go-lucky conclusion for this one. It's just scary. But it's this sort of simmering, wait-and-see kind of scary. And there doesn't feel like there's a lot we can do. There are, of course, little things we can do. We can express ourselves freely. We can go to events and show that we're not scared. We can take further steps. There are amazing organizations in Texas who will show up armed and stand in the way of armed protesters. It's not violent in the sense that they're instigating harm. There are people there with guns already. Everyone knows that when there's like guns on one side, the outcome is inevitable. So these people are actually showing up and taking community defense seriously, and that's amazing. Showing up for protests, commenting on local legislatures' bills, even though, that doesn't actually change these sort of ideological operatives. It contributes to the general sense that there is a strong resistance against this. But ultimately, there isn't a silver bullet. And even the more radical, kind of arm yourself, learn to use a weapon, that kind of advice, it has limited applicability. When you exist in incredibly small numbers in a large country, armed defense is such a last resort as to be, sort of an afterthought, if I'm being honest. The only time it really is useful is when you have, a large enough portion of the population to actually commit to, sort of paramilitary. When you have that, soldiery is a legitimate form of self-defense in, the case of those situations. But I don't think owning a gun is a shortcut solution to solving this problem. I do think knowing how to use one is beneficial as a skill set, just in case. But I don't quite see how you get from there to, an actual fair form of government. Something about democratic workers' councils. Yeah, that's how you get there. Use the guns to seize the means of production, and then you form workers' councils, and they form the government. Yes. What could go wrong? But I don't want to seem fatalistic. I don't think that even if they come to power, that they're going to have such an easy time enforcing their will on the rest of us. I think that our government has lost legitimacy, and that there will be a case, if things get really bad, for states to simply not play ball. And then if you start to get into states versus the federal government on a broader level, I don't know how that ends. It's nothing I want to live through, So, dear God, I hope it doesn't come to pass. Whatever happens, it just doesn't feel like this is something that will be resolved anytime soon. The threat will linger, and we'll have to live with that. Knowing that at any time we are off track, taken aback, that they might slip in and try to pull everything that we've built down. So I guess all we can really do is stay vigilant and try to fight every way that we can. I guess that's the conclusion. I decided not to make this video. And then I woke up this morning and I had to put it together. So I've thrown it together faster than I usually make such a long form video, but just wanted to, say happy Pride to everybody, because it's Pride. So we're going to go on a fun Pride bike ride. I don't want to be a downer. There are many things to celebrate. This is something that we have to live with. And we have to, as Rosa Luxemburg would say, we have to still be able to dance. Because a dour revolution is not a successful revolution most of the time. A successful revolution should celebrate life and art and beauty and joy and all the things that we all care about. So I'm going to get back to making videos about tiny models and the worlds they live in, and occasionally spreading communist propaganda. I want everyone to just be vigilant and stay fighting. As always, thanks to Carl Casey at Webbat Audio for the show's theme music. And of course, thank you to my patrons. You guys make everything I do here possible. And if you too would like to support the show for as little as $2 a month, you can become a patron, join the Discord server, and generally know that you're helping keep this show coming. And of course, don't forget to check out the podcast, Dome Runners, on wherever you get your podcasts from. And everybody out there, please stay safe. And don't forget to change your paint water.